What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So, major announcement, the 2024 Moto G Stylus is Motorola's best phone ever. Longtime subscribers of the channel might understand what a monumental statement that is. I've been reviewing Motorola's Moto G devices since like 2020, and it's no secret that I've generally been quite critical of them, especially the last couple release cycles. But this year's G Stylus has so many improvements and is such a solid smartphone that it's deserving of all the praise. Now, when I say this is Motorola's best phone, I want to make it clear that it isn't the highest spec, most powerful, or most feature-packed phone. But dollar for dollar, taking into account its uniqueness, its fanfare, and its improvements from the previous year, I think it's easily the best Moto G device ever, and probably the best phone for folks looking to try something else besides Apple or Samsung here in the US. The Moto G Stylus has actually been a pretty popular phone regardless of its previous pitfalls, probably because it's the only other device with a stylus that isn't a $1,000 Samsung or a $1,000 iPad. And considering the deals and discounts from the carriers, I think you can see why a lot of people are enticed by it. But this year, rather than compromising and getting a mediocre screen or a budget-looking build or specs that struggle to handle with even the simplest of stuff, the 2024 G Stylus has all the features and characteristics of a phone that you'd want to have, and that even the most critical, tech-savvy buyers might even appreciate. And if you have or had a Moto G Stylus previously, or have been waiting to upgrade or otherwise abandoned Motorola, whether it was my doing or not, I think you should seriously consider this 2024 G Stylus as your next smartphone. I also think you should seriously consider Tello, this video's sponsor, as your next carrier. I first recommended Tello almost a year ago, and since then, not only have they gotten better, but they've also gotten cheaper. Tello offers affordable and customizable phone plans, so you pay for exactly what you need, only when you need it. Tello's Unlimited Everything data plan is now just $25 a month, and Tello provides nationwide 4G LTE and 5G coverage, the same great service as those big wireless companies, at a fraction of the cost. You also get additional perks like free hotspot and Wi-Fi calling, and international calls to more than 60 countries. There's no extra fees, no commitments, you can cancel at any time or adjust your plan whenever you'd like, and Tello also makes it easy to use your current phone on their network. Most GSM or unlocked devices are eligible, like the 2024 G Stylus, and you can check their website to see if you're compatible. Tello offers the most flexible and affordable phone plans out there, and they're also highly rated by their current customers, including me. Create a custom plan and see how much you can save at Tello.com, or click the link in the video description below. So the improvements with this phone begin almost immediately with a more premium build and better overall design. The screen this year is bigger, a massive 6.7 inches corner to corner, and that size increase is due in part thanks to a better screen-to-body ratio and slimmer black borders framing the top and bottom. This phone is a far cry from the budgety-looking cheaper Moto Gs with their bulky bottom chins, and in the hand, while this phone is still quite the thing to hold and use, it's especially tall if you couldn't tell, I think most people are used to phones like this and might actually prefer something so large. You really get a lot of screen real estate to utilize. Around back, most of the Moto Gs this year have this new eco-leather material that sort of mimics my moleskin notebook or pleather desk mat. It's a nice fit and feel, it's really unique, and it oozes the essence of premium, even if it's mostly just a nod to Motorola's sustainability pandering. The only downside is you'll get little fuzzes and debris within the wrinkles of the faux leather material that are sometimes hard to wipe clean, but I definitely prefer this to the imitation frosted plastic builds that have plagued most budget and mid-range smartphones now. The frame of this phone is still plastic though, even if Motorola does try to disguise this part as a color-matched metal, but literally nothing about this phone looks or feels cheap at all anymore. If you handed this phone to the average person, they might seriously think it's a name brand device with twice the price tag. On the left side, the SIM card tray also still doubles as a micro SD card slot for expandable storage, a feature I think people still appreciate nowadays, or they're starting to wish for a return, considering all the nonsense cloud storage stuff these companies are pushing. You can get either 128 or 256 gigabytes of onboard storage with this phone, which is pretty good, but popping in a $30 SD card to dump some pictures or files on and free up some space is always very convenient. Speaking of space, Motorola ships this and other G devices with their various app folders and other pre-installed Moto things. And I know plenty of other Android OEMs do this, especially Samsung nowadays, with their dozen or so apps that they try and keep you engulfed in that ecosystem with. But Motorola's app advertising folders are especially egregious. The Games Hub, for example, immediately captured almost a gigabyte of space the first time I accidentally opened it, which is wild. And these folders, they basically masquerade as your own app folders, when in fact they just advertise spam apps that don't even lead to the Google Play Store if you want to install one. I'm sure this is a way for Motorola to subsidize the price of the phone itself by agreeing to showcase these apps to users. And fortunately, you can uninstall each one of these spammy, scammy folders. I just worry that the average person might not understand that they aren't actually their own app folders. A quick Google search shows plenty of people confused and frustrated by these folders. So I'd like to encourage Motorola to just ditch the questionable full folder practice and have the apps just be apps that people can more easily understand and uninstall if they want. Now, the single biggest improvement to the G Stylus this year is with the display. And not just because it's a little larger and the borders are a little slimmer, but it's a better spec OLED display for the first time ever. The 6.7-inch screen is now a POLED panel, which has the capability of displaying 1 billion colors, according to Motorola, and they didn't take back any of the other screen specs to achieve this. It's still a 2400 by 1080 full HD display, and it's also a 120Hz high refresh rate display. So they did it. They hit my trifecta of screen specs that encompass an excellent viewing experience, and I literally could not be happier. The OLED panel is a big one. Not only is this screen more colorful, but it's also brighter with a little less glare, though I think Motorola still cheaps out on the display glass, so it's not perfect. But compared to the LCD display on the G Power, for example, might be a little hard to tell, but the G Stylus is going to be punchier, more saturated, showing more colors with a more vibrant look, and a higher maximum brightness for an all-around more enticing view for all of your content. On top of all that, it's still just as sharp as before, packing in some 395 pixels per inch on this extra large size screen. You can push this phone right up to your nose and you won't see a pixel. And if you go into settings and enable the adaptive 120Hz refresh rate, you'll get that silky smooth visual and lightning fast taps and touches that make the phone feel fast and sort of flagship. This new display is reasons 1, 2, and 3 for considering the G Stylus this year, and it's really the first Moto G with such a good display at all. For years I criticized Motorola's choice of screen, but not this year. This is exactly the sort of display this phone deserves. Also, you get an in-display fingerprint sensor under the display for unlocking, another semi-premium feature, and it works quite well too. You can pair it with Face Unlock and pretty much get into the phone instantly with no trouble. Also, Motorola kept the dual stereo speakers, so your new and improved viewing experience is even better paired with a solid sound. Here's a quick sample so you can get an idea. So as far as the stylus experience, unfortunately, this hasn't really changed since like the first Moto G stylus. And I think part of the reason for that is a lack of software innovation or integration on Motorola's part, and also the need to keep this phone relatively cost effective. The stylus is housed on the bottom right corner of the phone, the opposite side of the headphone jack, which is still there by the way, and the top of the stylus pen has this clicky top that sticks out and allows you to remove it from its spot. It's exactly the same as the last couple of years, and the physical stylus itself, I think, is maybe a tiny bit bigger and thicker than last year, but it's still the same simple metal stick with a soft, squishy mesh tip that it's always been. There's nothing smart about the stylus. It's not connected to the phone in any way like Samsung's S Pen or the Apple Pencil, and it has the same functionality as a stick you'd pick up from the ground. So none, essentially. But with the stylus, you can tap, touch, and swipe your way through the phone as a sort of more precise fingertip. And I think with the big screen size and relatively precise touch points, some folks might enjoy this two-handed stylus user experience more so than trying to stretch your thumb around the big display or tapping with your fingers. Motorola once again gives you this little shortcut menu that launches as soon as you pull out the stylus, and this menu shows a handful of stylus-specific Moto apps like the handwriting calculator and GIF maker, but you can add any apps you want to this shortcut menu and pair the stylus with any writing or drawing apps you prefer, like Keep Notes or a random coloring book. Or you can just use the shortcut menu for non-stylus apps. It's all up to you. The actual writing and drawing experience continues to be fairly rudimentary on this phone. And like I said, I think that's because Motorola needs to still keep costs down. So having a smart connected Bluetooth stylus with buttons and air gestures, or even making the screen better and made for the stylus, would probably have this phone creep up to $700 or $800, which sort of defeats its purpose. The pen tip doesn't really have any pressure sensitivity or like angles, and when you're writing, there's a noticeable gap or lag between the pen tip and the line on screen. But all this is to be expected with a simple metal stick and a phone in the sub $500 category. Just the fact that this phone exists as it is, I think is good enough. For the handful of people who find the stylus fun or endearing, it's a nice little add-on. Some people might even consider the stylus useful in more ways than one. It's a perfectly fine alternative to spending 4 figures on a phone you otherwise don't fully need. And while I wish there were more stylus-specific software features or UI functions, I think the fact that it's there as a built-in feature in and of itself is all this phone really needs. What's also nice is that if you do find yourself fully utilizing the stylus experience for notes, drawings, work, school stuff, whatever, or want to use this phone in a more taxing way in general, the specs this year can handle you. This phone is powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 processor, paired to 8GB of RAM. It's the same processor as last year, but you get twice as much RAM, and collectively, this is more than enough to handle 95% of what you might throw at it. Here are the Geekbench numbers if you want to compare your current phone or any other, and while I personally feel like this phone is plenty powerful, especially with the extra RAM, there are some caveats to consider. Obviously, you've got to like Motorola's Android flair, and some people absolutely do. It hasn't changed much in the last 2 or 3 years, and I don't see Motorola dropping any major new Android skins or changing up the UI anytime soon. In fact, this phone probably won't get but one major Android update in its lifetime, and that's a bit of a bummer. Motorola's lack of long-term software support is a point that tech-savvy people like to bring up, but for some users, it's actually a plus. There's no new features to worry about, no UI changes that mess everything up. To each their own, I guess, but I'd prefer Motorola to at least support their phones for 3 or 4 years at a minimum, so they sort of feel like long-term plays, rather than yearly e-waste. Aside from running Android 14 or maybe Android 15 for the remainder of this phone's existence on Earth, it is plenty powerful enough to even game at pretty high graphics settings. Again, the processor didn't get upgraded. Probably another cost-saving measure. But last year, the G Stylus had either 4 or 6GB of RAM. This year with 8, the phone does truly feel faster and more responsive, certainly with gaming, and especially when jumping from app to app. And like I mentioned earlier, this phone with its stylus is sort of masquerading as a higher tier, capable, extra feature phone with the potential to do more. More work, more fun with the stylus, so you'd want the phone to be able to handle that, and it certainly does. If you don't care about Motorola's Android experience, and you never cared about software updates, you'll at least be certain that this is a fast, functional, and capable phone with the decent specs for its price. And that's not something I've always been able to say about Motorola devices. If you watched my Moto G Power review or my every 2024 Moto G phone comparison video, you'll know that the 5000 mAh battery packed inside this phone, while big, is the same size battery as all the other Moto phones this year. On the one hand, that's great. I think most people will pull an all-dayer with this thing on a single charge, but this phone is just so huge and potentially such a powerhouse that I'm surprised Motorola didn't push the limits a little bit more. What also continues to irk me, as you all know, is that while this phone supports both fast 30-watt wired charging and 15-watt wireless charging, also a new feature for this phone, Motorola doesn't give give you the accessories to take advantage of that. So please, go out and get yourself a couple of new fast-charging USB-C bricks and a compatible wireless charger, and juice up at the fastest speeds this phone supports. You paid for it, so you may as well take advantage of it. For the cameras, Motorola seems to have swapped out all the lenses for slightly better ones, though the difference doesn't make this phone flagship caliber. It's still the same slightly over-processed Moto-looking pictures and videos that they've offered for years, and it's probably the final thing this phone needs to improve on to be perfect. The rear lens setup is a dual 50 megapixel main and 12 megapixel ultra-wide. I love the ultra-wide personally. It's obviously way more useful than any macro or depth sensors that plagued previous budget phones. The selfie lens doubles the megapixels, 32, but that spec doesn't matter nearly as much as how you look when you snap a picture. Motorola's camera app has remained relatively unchanged over the last few release cycles, and unlike a Samsung or an Apple, who push camera hardware and software features whether people use them or not, Motorola is content offering folks plenty of useful stuff, a couple higher-end add-ons, and not much more than that. Instagram influencers might take advantage of the 50 megapixel ultra-res photos or 4K filming, but for everyone else, this phone is going to snap perfectly fine pictures of your pets and your food. Snarky comments aside, I do think this phone takes decent pictures or videos. It's just that the standard for smartphone cameras is so high nowadays that the gap between this and even the regular iPhone still feels pretty far. But overall, there's nothing outright bad about the cameras. They're just exactly what you'd expect from a mid-tier Moto device, even in 2024, and even with all the other improvements this phone offers. And there were a lot of improvements. A nicer design and better build, way better OLED screen, twice the RAM and a plenty capable processor, fast charging, wireless charging. The 2024 Moto G Stylus literally has everything my Motorola hating hands could ever want in a smartphone that I'm using, and I think for Moto customers, new and old, this is probably the G Stylus they've all been waiting for too. This is absolutely, unequivocally the Motorola phone to buy this year. The best Moto device probably in the last 2 or 3 years at least, and I hope that everyone who is interested buys this thing so that Motorola themselves know they did a really nice job on this smartphone. But what do you guys think of the 2024 Moto G Stylus? Can you see yourself using it? Does it have enough improvements? Let me know in the comments down below, and also fill me in if you've been using it yourself. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video, or at least found it somewhat helpful. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter, and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.